is really fallen IDF soldiers and victims of Palestinian terrorism. We are supremely honored today to have with us Sherri Mandell. As many of you might know, Sherri and Seth are the parents of Koby Mandell, who was 13 years old when he and Yosef Ishran decided to do the Huck Finn thing and play hooky from school, and were brutally murdered in a cave outside their family's community of Tekoa, Israel. Sherri has been a personal friend of mine for years and years, and she is actually my spiritual mentor. Sherri is a brilliant, sensitive, and talented writer, and the book that she wrote, The Blessing of a Broken Heart, which was published in 2003, is what I use to get through the 2 fast days a year when I do manage to fast, Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av. And I realized that if Sherri, with all of the trials that she's gone through, can still manage to have emunah, faith in God, then I can as well. Aside from The Blessings of a Broken Heart, she's written amazing books. And by the way, The Blessing of the Broken Heart in 2004 won the Jewish National Book Award. And she's written The Road to Resilience, From Chaos to Celebration, Writers of the Holocaust, and your most recent book is a memoir, Reaching for Comfort. And she received the ADL Partners for Peace Award in 2004 and the Jewish Women's International Women to Watch Award. And she's won the first prize for short story in Moment Magazine's Karma contest. And she's also the author of many lovely children's books. And now, before I introduce you to Sherri, who also was the inspiration for the Koby Mandell Act, which I worked tirelessly on for years and years, which was used to open up an office in the Department of Justice for American victims of Palestinian terrorism, of all terrorism abroad. I remember calling Sherri when she was sitting Shiva and asking her if she'd like this legislation named in memory of Koby. And she said, I could just see Koby jumping up and down in heaven to have a law named after him. And I thought to myself, sweetheart, it's a long way before a bill becomes a law, but because it gave you a moment of happiness, I vowed to myself that I would do it, and it took years of work. And now we do have the Office of Justice for Victims of Overseas Terrorism. And before Sherri begins, we would just like to play a little video. So, Naomi, can we get the video on? Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Do you hear the sound?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Naomi, is there a way to get the sound on? Okay. Sorry, we apologize about this.
Mm-hmm. Say share screen with computer audio.
Oh, it should say share screen with computer audio. I apologize about this. Mm. 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 Okay.
we could show it at the end.
Well, show it at the end, right? Okay. All right. Okay. So without further ado, it's really my honor to introduce you to an amazing woman, Sherri Mandell.
Okay, thank you. Well, this gives me this chance to start with something funny, because if we were going to show the video, I would have to go right into sadness. And Yom HaZikaron is just a very hard day for us. And it's not really for us, Yom HaZikaron. It's really for the rest of Israel, because we don't need to remember. And in a way, we don't, it's like, it's very hard, all the remembering we carry. But I'm going to start first with something funny before I talk about memory and commemoration, because I want you to know a little bit about who I am, where I'm coming from. So a few weeks ago, we went to Tel Aviv to an Airbnb, and it was a disaster, this place. But I went with friends, a few couples, and we knew we would have fun. But we went there, and they didn't have a lot of things, and it was right before Shabbat, and we needed soap for dish soap. So my friend said, "You call," because this guy, the balabait, wasn't answering. My friend, because he was already annoyed with her, and so I called him up, and he said to me, "At ola Hadassah, are you a new immigrant?" So I said, I'm just glad he didn't ask how many years I've been in the country, because it's 25. But I said, Taminani ola Hadassah. Like, I'm always a ola Hadassah. And then I went on to ask him, I said, Yesh lachem, anachnu sorchim nozelet lehakelim. Like, I thought I was saying we need dish soap. Actually, I was saying to him, we need snot to wash the dishes. We to wash the dishes. So that's, I am an unlikely candidate, really, to be a Zionist and to be speaking about Israel and to have had my son murdered and to really be part of the Israeli story. But, sometimes I think it's a privilege, because we are part of this story. And my husband and I, we just got asked, like, why did you make aliyah? And part of why we made aliyah was because we wanted to be part of the Jewish story. And the Jewish story is being written here. I mean, it's also being written in America, but I think more so, obviously, here. And we wanted to be part of that. But, we didn't really understand what it meant. It has not been easy. And it's 20 years since my son was murdered. He was killed on May 8th, 2001 with his friend Yosef Ishran. You'll see in the video, I hope, that we live on the edge of a wadi, of a canyon that's just spectacular. In fact, Koby, for his bar mitzvah, wanted to do the hike. You can hike to the Dead Sea from here. You have to start at like midnight, and you hike all night, because it's usually too hot to go during the day, or during the winter you can't chance the rains. So a lot of people go at night. And we went for his, actually talking about commemoration, we went for his yahrzeit twice, and we run a camp for kids, for bereaved children. So a lot of those kids also joined us. It's amazing how kids can hike with flip-flops on for 15 kilometers up and down hills. But it was, it's truly spectacular. And they went down into the wadi, and anyway, I don't like to talk about the way he was killed. So, Zikaron, like, a few weeks after Koby was killed, like Sarah said, how when she called me and talked about the Koby Mandell Act, that I was so moved, and it gave me hope, and that's really what everybody needs in this world, is hope. So I think that commemoration, it has to be tied to hope. And that's really the thesis I'm going to share with you tonight, that the Jewish commemoration is always tied to hope and building and post-traumatic growth. So that's where I hope to journey with you tonight. We got the idea to do a camp for kids because we saw our own children. Koby was the oldest, and my other kids were in 6th grade, 5th grade, and 6 years old. And they really had nowhere to turn, because in families like ours, the parents are broken. It's impossible to keep like that vessel of the self together in the same way. And I was thinking about this because talking about it with my children, and we had a big discussion just last night and we haven't really talked about everything that we felt and went through. But I said that I couldn't be a mother to them the way I needed to be. And I realized today, because the vessel is broken. So there's nothing there. And in order to parent, you have to have a vessel that's whole. So we, both my husband and I had to rebuild that. But the kids, they're left out a little bit. And so we saw that our kids were left out, and we knew that other bereaved children were like the silent victims in families like ours. And we got the idea to do a camp for children. By the way, Camp Moshava had invited us the first year to their camp, and the 2 older kids went. And I'm also going to talk about community, but it's also community that saves us. And so their invitation also saved us. So we got the idea to do a camp. It was kind of interesting because we had the camp before we had the kids, because the first year, nobody knew us. It was during the Intifada. It was 2002. Who's going to send their children away? And so the first week, we actually invited Magen David volunteers to the camp. And, they really needed the camp. And then we got the kids for the next session. And since then, we've had the camp almost 20 years. Of course, we didn't have it the past summer, but we've had the camp every year. And they also have reunion camps. And during the Intifada, we would have 600 kids who had mothers or fathers or sisters or brothers murdered. These kids, they have very, very hard stories. I can just tell you, like, one of the stories was a girl. She was born on the day that her father was killed, because they were in a car and they were driving, and the mother and father were both shot. And thank God the mother survived, but she had to go into emergency surgery, and she delivered the baby. And so this girl, her birthday is her father's day of death. There are other children. We had kids who were injured, and one of these boys, he was stabbed, and actually he came to visit us now for Pesach, for Passover. And like, when the kids get older, they understand what the camp meant to them. And they all tell us, I thought it was a regular camp, but actually you saved my life, because it's a place where they can be themselves, and what they've gone through doesn't make them a victim, and it doesn't make them different. And they can share, and a lot of them share very freely. In fact, my daughter was a camper, and then she was a counselor and a group leader. And she said the kids come into the bunk and they're like, how did who died in your family? And it's a kind of language that just can't be used in ordinary life. And it's so liberating for these children. one kid told me that a girl, she said that Camp Koby was the place that she sang, that she felt that couldn't sing at home and she couldn't sing at school. But at Camp Koby, she felt like everybody loved her. And so she could sing. So we create a community for these kids. You know, like EMET is also a community. And tonight we're creating a community. And Sarah has created this community. And community is so important in healing. Actually, in my book, The Road to Resilience, I have the 7 spiritual steps of resilience, and they all start with C. And one is community, and one is commemoration. So each of these leads to resilience. Dr. Brandon Court of Duke University, he studied 141 former child soldiers in Nepal, who fought in a war in Nepal. And he found that their post-war mental health was more dependent on the way they were welcomed by the community than by what they went through. And, you know, we can understand that by the way soldiers are returned, like the Vietnam soldiers, the way the veterans came in, the way they were returned. And really, a lot of them were not welcomed. And I have to say, I saw a Veterans Day parade in Manhattan 2 years ago, and seeing those Vietnam veterans was so heartbreaking, because I know that a lot of them suffered even more when they returned and weren't welcomed. We also create a community. We have groups for mothers, for bereaved mothers and widows, and we run retreats. And at one retreat we ran a retreat. There's somebody who offers us his Zimmer, his villa with a pool, and he gives it to us for free. And he always acts like we're doing him a favor, him to be able to give to us. And that kind of giving is just magnificent, because sometimes people give, but like, you know, especially I'm always asking for people to volunteer and help us. And even sometimes people do something, but there's such a price, like you feel the price. And when somebody gives like that, it's so liberating. I keep using the word liberating. I guess I want to be liberated. Anyway, there was a woman in a widow, and we did watsu, which is like massage in the water. And the therapist had everybody holding each other in the water and supporting each other. And one of the widows said, you know, she closed her eyes and she said, finally, I feel like I can trust. And if I can trust you guys to hold me, then how can I not trust God that he's also taking care of me? And it was just such a beautiful moment. So the community, sometimes people, you know, lots of times when bad things happen, it really feels like, you know, where is God? And I really feel like people become God's representatives. And it's the community then can show somebody who suffers that, no, the world is good, and we remember and we care. So that brings me to commemoration and remembering, because the human impulse is to forget. You know, like Freud based his whole psychology basically on that, on early repression. But Jews, we love to remember. Like Judaism is a religion where we are always remembering. And historian Yosef Yerushalmi, in his book, he says, to remember is mentioned 169 times in the Torah. We're always remembering. In the davening, also in the prayer, we're supposed to every day remember 7 things. Miriam and going out of Egypt and Shabbos. We're always remembering. And every Shabbos we're remembering, right? We remember, we read every holiday. I mean, Pesach, Passover, is the ultimate holiday of remembering, but remembering to retell, because just remembering isn't really enough. What we do with the memory, and it's also passing on the memory that counts. So it's very interesting. I read about a study with this woman, Sarah Duke. She was a therapist in Atlanta, and she noticed that the children that she worked with, the ones who knew the most about their families were the children who had the most resilience. And her husband was a professor at Emory, Marshall Duke, and he and a colleague, Robin Feibush, they tested out this hypothesis, and they made a do you know scale. It's a series of 20 questions, and it was simple questions like, do you know why your parents named you, your name? Do you know where your parents met? Do you know where your grandparents lived? Do you know what your grandmother, if she worked, what your grandfather did for a living? Do you know how your parents met? So those simple questions, if the kids knew the answers to that, it turned out they were more resilient. And they also tested this do you know scale after 9/11. And it turned out that, again, the children who either witnessed 9/11 or had, God forbid, people die in it, that those children were more resilient from knowing the family story. There's a difference between, as I said, there's a difference between remembering and acting on memory. And the Hebrew word hansacha, which means commemoration, hansacha has the word netzach in it. And netzach is eternity. So I think that the Hebrew really points us toward what the idea of remembering is, that it's not just to remember what happened, but it's push us toward what we should do in the future. And it's also so the whole community gathers in these memories and shares these memories and has a kind of shared destiny based on these memories. You could say that's why it's so important that like we remember all the time, and we remember, Yom HaShoah starts, Holocaust Day starts this whole period of remembering. People always talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is very true and very, valid. But there's also post-traumatic growth. And I think that, our goal at Camp Koby is to enable all of the people we work with to have post-traumatic growth, and all the mothers and the widows, because especially at the camp, we see the kids as leaders, as potential leaders, because when you have had such a tragedy at a young age, either it's going to destroy you or it's going to build you. And our goal is always to be built. And you could say that this whole country, in a way, is an example of post-traumatic growth. And, to live in Israel now, you just we see all the growth and all the energy and all the activity and all the culture. And I mean, not this past year, but Israel is just a place that's, it's like fabulous place now to live, because it's been reborn, and it's always in the process of being reborn. So I guess that's my final point, is that we need to use memory and the past to renew ourselves and to constantly feel that we're in this state of renewal as a community because of what we've endured, and because we're able to hold on to it, and not repress it, and carry it with us as we move forward.
Thank you, Sherri. And what you're saying is so true. It's actually the thread of the narrative of the Jewish people that we read every Shabbat that sustained us through the dark years of our diaspora till there was a rebirth. And, and this rebirth has been incredible, the fast pace that it has grown, and technology and medicine, and has become a major military powerhouse that I know a lot of the world, the Sunni Gulf states, are all relying on. So have you seen among your campers a sense of pride in the state of Israel and more of a desire to serve in the military than maybe in the average population? Or is it hard to say?
Well, no, I mean, first of all, terror victims, the parents get to decide. They have to sign for their kids to go in the army. And it's a big decision. And like, we didn't sign because I knew I couldn't handle it. I just couldn't go through that. But most parents do, because, you know, they're Israeli and they understand that, they understand the army. Like, you know, we never went to an army. But it's not always easy for terror victims to be in the army because, you know, we've undergone trauma. And when you've undergone trauma, it is really hard. So I've heard stories of kids who tried to, you know, to be in combat and had to leave.
So you also live in an incredible community in Tekoa. Can you talk a little bit about Tekoa and whether or not people who live in a big city like Tel Aviv or Haifa or Jerusalem might not be getting some of the benefits that you get from living in a small community?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Tekoa, first of all, when we moved here in 1998, there were fewer than 200 families. And so after Koby was killed, people really came into my life here, and especially, you know, all the Americans, all the English speakers that I knew, but also Israelis, you know, who came in and like they learned with me, and they came on Shabbat, and like they came very close. And, you know, now Tekoa, 20 years later, we're big. We have, you know, over 1,000 families. We have like, you know, 6 different neighborhoods, probably 12 different shuls. But, you know, we're still like a small town. But yeah, it is different in the in my area. But in Jerusalem also, I think people feel it. I'm not sure. In Tel Aviv, it's harder because in the city, it's just harder to find that sense of community.
Right. So are there any questions that have come in from the audience, or are people just spellbound by you? They might just be spellbound and mobilized in terms of...
We have 2 questions right now
okay.
that were submitted, if you don't mind. The first question is, what happened in place of regular Camp Koby during summer 2020 due to COVID?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, we were in Seger. We were like in lockdown for part of the summer. So we did things on Zoom. And then when we opened up, we did Camp Koby in a car. And some counselors went around to kids' houses, you know, and like met outside. But we were just limited like everybody else. And also we never knew what was going to be, you know, if we were allowed to visit or not. So please God, we'll be able to have a camp this summer because now Israel is open.
Thank you. And another question is given all that your family has done to help bereaved families, were your kids role models among other bereaved kids when they were younger?
Oh, you know, that's a question I have never had. Were my kids role models? No, but maybe, no, I don't think so. But first of all, they were 6, you know, and 11 and 12. So kids don't really look to each other as role models at that point. I think as they got older, I think, you know, maybe some people looked at them as role models. And Eliana is very involved in the camp. So people look to her as a role model because she was their counselor, and then the Rakaz, and then the head counselor, and now she's going to work for the foundation. So they'll definitely look at her as a role model.
Then there are a number of Israeli, I guess, citizens who have become sort of superstars or icons due to their personal tragedies. There's the military figures, Ziv Shilon, there's Miriam Peretz and others. And I was wondering, what personality traits or beliefs in God, or where's the source of power coming from that enables you to not only carry your weight, but serve as a role model to an entire, not only a community, but a country, and sometimes it even goes beyond the borders of the state of Israel. But where do you gather all of that courage, faith, energy from to be such a powerful person?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, for my husband, because my husband started the foundation, and I'm like a co-director, but he really took responsibility for all the financial pressure. I started all the women's programs, and I think that I just had, it was all will. It was will, because I felt, I sort of felt like I had faced something so hard that the other things just didn't seem as hard. And also, I just wanted people to remember Koby. That was my, and I needed him to be remembered. And I felt like my husband Seth and I, we felt like we're just not going to let him go. We're not going to let him go. We're going to keep his spirit alive. And, I think that was our motivation. And also, my husband, he said right away, because I was totally destroyed. And I said, what are we going to do? And he said right away, we have 3 other kids, and we're not going to let the terrorists destroy them. So that was also our motivation. And I think also in starting the foundation, it gave us a way to feel whole again, because we could give. And we needed to give. Also, we received a lot. After Koby was killed, we had so many people who helped us, and like, I have a friend, Jerry Freund of blessed memory, and she went to Radcliffe. And I remember coming downstairs one night during the Shiva, and she was, cleaning the bathroom, and other people were cooking and doing my laundry. And for 6 months, women from Efrat brought us food for Shabbat. Sarah made the Koby Mandell Act. People all over the world gave to us. And so I think that we received so much. That was also part of it, that we had a lot to give. And like the first women's healing retreats started, first of all, the first one was in English. We've had about 40 since then. And we've reached almost 1,000 women. But the first one we did in English, and it was my friends who ran the retreat, because my friend Shira, she's a grief counselor, and it's her husband's first yortzeit was today, Jonathan Chernobyl. So may his neshama have an aliyah. So she's a grief counselor, and she was my friend. She taught English in the school here. So she came and helped, and other people, other of my friends who were therapists, they came and ran the retreat. So it was a fact of receiving so much.
Mm-hmm. And
that gave us the will and the ability, I think.
And is the Ishran family involved in any way in this initiative as well, or do they have their own? What's the dynamics?
Oh, we're very good friends, Rena and I, and their kids came to the camp, but they don't run. They're not part of the foundation.
And on that note, another question that we received is, we have an audience member asking about your relationship maybe with Raphael Franco, a mother of Naftali Franco.
Yeah, so I know Raphael, and we're friends. And actually, when there was a book launch for my book on resilience, so she spoke, and she also came and spoke to the one of the mothers' healing retreats. So yeah, we're in touch.
And then another question is how do you define, or where do you draw that line of always wanting to commemorate a loved one, but also not having that define your life as being too entrenched in we'll call it pain? Like, where's that line between trying to launch initiatives in his memory and quote unquote moving on in life, which is, I know, something that hard to do if possible at all?
Yeah, I think you do both. I don't, I hate that word moving on, because you don't move on, you move with. And it is a hard balance. It's a very hard balance, but it's trauma. It's not just, an ordinary, not that any loss is ordinary, but, if you lose your parents at an old age, of course, it doesn't stay with you in the same way. It's something, it's just this kind of trauma. It's not something you can't walk away from it. So it's a matter of finding balance, I think. And, I haven't always succeeded, but most of the time I have. Like on Purim, people want to come to my house for the party. So we did something right.
So would you just share with us a little bit about what your other children are doing, and if you have become a grandmother? And
yes. So my son Gavi is he's 25 and he's in social work school at Hebrew U, and he has a little baby named Sori, which Sori means, it's an ingredient in the incense, and it actually means healing. And then my son Daniel, he's getting a master's in gender studies, and he's also a potter, and he makes sinks, and he will ship them across the world. Beautiful ceramic sinks. And Eliana has 3 boys, and she's working for the foundation now, but she's actually on maternity leave. And her oldest son was born on Parshat Amalek. Oh, it was, and his brit was on Purim in Jerusalem. So Eliana, I was just speaking to her, and we were talking about that, and she said, you know what? I think the fact that Ori was born during that time period, it means we won.
Right. So let's see if we could get that video back on, and with sound. If not, I'll just say a couple of words to wrap up. So let's give it one more try, and I apologize to the audience. Let's see if we could do the share screen and get the video on with sound. Is anyone? Wonderful. Few options. Okay. I'm not sure we have sound. I really apologize about this. But let me just see if there's anything I can do. Okay, so I'm going to put the video in. There you see Koby as a beautiful little boy. And we're going to put the video in the chat for everyone to see. In the meantime, I'd like to wrap up and to say that what Sherri has done is with her pain is something so incredibly beautiful. And she said to me many, many years ago when I was working on the Koby Mandell Act that we take our pain and we turn it into love and healing, and they take their pain and they turn it into death and more pain. And that is the distinction between the state of Israel and the Jewish people and our enemies. And Sherri will be very embarrassed, but I think she does embody to me everything that is so beautiful about being a Jew and about being an Israeli. And I want you to please check out, first of all, the Koby Mandell Foundation. It's very important that everybody support the wonderful work of Sherri and Seth. That's kobymandell.org. And to please go to amazon.com. And all you have to do is write books by Sherri Mandell, and all the books will come up. And we will send the video out to all the panelists. It is in the chat too. But we will send the video, to all the attendees. And I cannot thank you enough, Sherri, for being the person that you are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And tonight, or tomorrow night, actually, we're invited to participate with the Israeli Embassy in the Yom HaAtzmaut celebration. Please watch out for notices about that. And the following week, we are privileged to have Jonathan Tobin, who will talk about the unfortunate divide between American Jews and Israeli Jews and what we can do to heal that divide. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.